This is the Fujifilm X-T4 and this is what it can do. The X-T4 isn't just a slight upgrade on the X-T3. It's got some incredible new features which completely sets it apart. It's almost a new camera series completely. We've got Embody image stabilization now, 5-axis, and it can do up to 6.5 stops of stabilization with 18 out of 29 of the Fuji XF lenses, which is pretty impressive. And it can be used in both stills and video, so that's going to be great for both types of user. We've got a new mechanical shutter, may not sound that interesting, but it does mean the life of that shutter is now rated up to 300,000 actuations. X-T3 was only rated up to 150,000, so that's double the life on that new shutter. And it also sounds lovely and means the camera can shoot up to 15 frames per second in continuous shooting, which is brilliant. The X-T3 could only do 11 with the mechanical shutter. We also now have a fully articulating screen. We've not seen that before in the XT series, so I think that's going to be really well received as well. The X-T4 has also got an improved AF algorithm, and it specifically improves tracking, face detect and eye detect. Now, pair that with the 15 frames per second mechanical shutter, and it makes quite an exciting combo to get action tracking shots. George has just said that he can easily jump the big bog that's in front of me, so I figured this was a perfect time to try out that face detect with the X-T4. I've put it in the 15 frames per second, continuous shooting using the mechanical shutter, and now we're going to see if George can make it and if the camera can stay locked on his face when he inevitably falls.
I kind of made it.
I think it got you.
Sort of.
Oh man. As you can see from those sequences, the face and eye detect worked really nicely. It lost him a couple of times, but he was running very, very fast, jumping, he's wearing a hat, high collared coat, so I'm really impressed with how it managed to perform. What I'm not so impressed with is how George managed to perform after. So whilst you were watching those lovely sequences, we walked 10 feet back to the main path, but unfortunately George had used all of his grace whilst
This is the last you're going to see of me on camera today.
You bought one pair of trousers! Oh, thanks George. So I've popped on the 50-140, really nice fast focusing lens, and the very muddy dog is just walking up here and I'm hoping she's going to shake. Yeah, there we go. Oh, so cute, look at that. And also you can hear that really nice mechanical shutter. You can hear that sort of slight dampening, good sound. Yeah, that's the sound you want from a mechanical shutter. We've just walked up this very muddy hill to take a look out at the valley behind me. As you can see, the weather's lovely, so that's gonna look nice. Britain in February, what can you do? However, before we do that, I want to talk a bit more about the internals of the X-T4. At its heart, we have a 26.1 megapixel APS-C size X-Trans4 CMOS sensor, and that's powered by an X processor 4. Having an APS-C size sensor, we know the benefits. 1.5 times crop means on the longer lenses, you get a little bit more length, but on the wider lenses, you lose a little bit. So on this 14mm, it's gonna act like kind of like a 21mm if we were looking at a full frame camera. So I've put this 14mm on the hopes of getting a nice wide of this very grey and rainy valley. Let's see what it can do. This beautiful New Forest pony has now almost walked too close to us. We waited and I hoped it would move off into the trees, but it hasn't. It actually came closer. It's moving away a little now. What we really want is for the light to strike the white horse in the trees so that we get the darkness of the trees around it and then the brightness of that horse. So we're just going to wait. I'm going to make my way around the outside. We've also been joined by another pony here as well. So we're going to make our way around the outside and hopefully just catch the light on that white pony. Just had a load of ponies come over to us. They're all making their way up the hill now. I think they thought we had food because I was changing a lens and it rustled in the bag and you saw their heads suddenly like all come towards us. The first pony that came up was a white or a light grey colour, and it worked so well against the background. I quickly flipped this into continuous low and just got some continuous frame of it coming up in tracking, and it worked so well. Here's the sequence. It's really beautiful. The horses make such lovely subjects. Apologies for the audio, we've now made our way down to the coast and it is exceedingly windy, but we've come here for that reason. At the moment there's some windsurfers playing in the waves beside me, and I've now got the 200mm prime on the X-T4, and I'm going to do a bit more with that continuous frame rate we've got in this. It's 15 frames per second using the mechanical shutter, but if I stick it in electronic shutter, you can get small bursts of continuous up to 30 frames per second, so we're going to have a go at that. The Embody image stabilization on the X-T4 is such a welcome help, especially when shooting with something like the 200mm. 6.5 stops with 18 out of 29 of the XF lenses, and that unit has been made 30% smaller than what is in the XH1. So it really helps to keep the body nice and light, nice and compact, which is obviously something Fuji are really, really passionate about. And I think without it, to be honest, the type of shots I'm trying to get here would be pretty much impossible with this lens, because I would just be all over the place and I would have to be using a gimbal type head on a tripod. And for this sort of stuff, you know, you need to be handheld, you need to be moving quickly. So that IBIS is allowing me to get shots that on the X-T3 would have been an utter nightmare. So I've started off by shooting with the electronic shutter, which gives me 20 frames per second with no crop. You can go up to 30 frames per second, that gives you a 1.29 crop. And what I've noticed already is that it can really lock on, that tracking's working really well. The frame rate is great. We are hitting the buffer quite quickly, but honestly, at the moment, I've been testing things like the A9 II 1DX Mark III, and yeah, you can shoot with them for ages, but they're workhorses made for sports and wildlife. This isn't. This is a hybrid camera that's built to be incredibly versatile, and it is. Today shows that alone, the amount of stuff I've been able to shoot with it. You know, it's getting all those frame rates. It's able to do up to, you know, 20, 30 frames per second for a little bit shorter time, admittedly, okay? But you've got to remember the value for money in this. The price is low. The X-T4's body is fully weather sealed. It's what you'd expect when you look at the X-T3, and I can say it works really well because we have been reviewing this almost exclusively in either heavy rain or medium rain, and it's been working perfectly well, so that's great. The body is slightly chunkier, I think I've mentioned that already, and I would expect that because of that new fully articulated screen and of course the addition of an IBIS unit inside. I would expect it to be a little bit bigger, but we're only talking a couple of mil. And the weight is also a little bit more than the X-T3 as well. X-T3 was running at 539 grams. The X-T4 is running at 607 grams. So it is a little more. I mean, we have to be realistic for the additions that we've now got in this camera over the X-T3. That weight is really nothing to worry about. If anything, it makes it slightly more balanced when you're using lenses like the 16 to 55 and the 50 to 140. Now, if you wanted to put a vertical grip on this, you can. There will be a new grip available, and that will give you the addition of 2 batteries in the grip and also 1 in the camera. And the battery is something I need to talk about. So I'll open this up and you will see a new battery. Look at that, a new battery. So this new battery is very exciting. Now, I can hear half of you out there going, yes, and half of you like, no, I have 46 batteries now for Fuji. I know, I understand that, but it needs a new battery to up that battery life. You know, we can't keep running mirrorless cameras on small batteries that aren't going to help with battery life. And this can run 500 shots, CEPA rated, on 1 battery. Up to 600 if you put it in eco mode, which it has. So if you're out for a full day, then that's fine. This battery, I used this camera all day yesterday. I shot with it all day, movie, stills, continuous shooting through the viewfinder using the screen, and it only went red when I got back to the hotel last night and was just messing about with it in my room. So I'm pretty happy with that. I think that's a blimmin' good battery, to be honest, for a mirrorless, kind of compact mirrorless like this, APS-C size sensor. The other thing we need to note with this is the change to the dials. So where movie used to be on the X-T3, it was on this drive dial here that you flicked across. It is no longer there, and therefore that dial has been slightly redesigned. It's okay. The only thing I'd say is that they've put HDR at the end, then single, and then the 2 continuous settings. My only problem with this is when I was shooting continuous and I wanted to flick back to single, I kept missing single and going to HDR. So I think it would have been nicer if single had been at the start of it, but there you go. It's just something they've done. It's not exactly a major issue. Now, the good thing is where movie has moved to, over here. This little switch here allows you to flick between stills and movie. And it's not just a really nice switch, that's not the main thing. The main thing is that Fuji have programmed the X-T4 to be a completely different camera in those 2 modes. If you're in stills mode, you have a stills Q menu, you have a stills full menu. When you flick to movie mode, you then have a movie Q menu and a movie main menu, and you don't have to sit there flicking through loads of settings that are all greyed out because you're not in the right mode. I think that's a brilliant, brilliant thing that Fuji have done. They've also made it so that it copies over your settings. So if you're in T on the shutter mode, which is obviously means your shutter is on your dials instead of up here, and if you're in custom on your ISO, it will hold your settings in the stills mode, and when you go over to movie, it will hold those settings. So let's say, for example, I'm a bit of a hybrid shooter, I'm shooting some stills at 1/1600th of a second, and then I'm like, oh, I want to get some movie, I flick that switch, and it will still be a 50th of a second in my movie mode. No cameras do this. It's a nightmare for hybrid shooters. It does my head in, and that is a fantastic feature by Fuji. That is something that would make me buy this camera because that drives me mad, and that is a fantastic thing that they've put into this X-T4. Now, the movie capabilities of the X-T4 are so exciting. So let's switch the switch to movie mode and see what it can do.
So now we're in the movie mode. Headlines, 4K, 10-bit internal, and we've also got, coming down to HD, we've got 240 frames FPS slow motion. Now, I'm going to go into some of the details for you. So that 4K 10-bit internal goes up to 60p. It is 420, not 422 internal. You can output it to an external monitor to get that 422 if you need that color sampling. Full HD, 240 frames per second. Now, you can output that at 25p or 50p, which gives you a 4 times or an 8 times slow motion. This kind of slow motion is incredible. We went to the beach earlier today and we saw some windsurfers. A perfect example of where slow motion really comes into play for things like sports and if you want to catch some seagulls on the winds, as we did as well. Another benefit of having that slow motion is that when you're shooting your cutaways for your video, it keeps your shots really steady. You can add a bit of movement in there as well, a little bit of parallaxing without having to worry about that shake. But if you're shooting in 25 frames per second, you still don't need to worry because of that internal IBIS stabilization. Also in this body is digital image stabilization. What that means is that it cuts in a little bit on the sensor, moves your frame about a bit to keep it steady for you. That does of course mean that your shot has a crop on it. So your 4K 60p without digital image stabilization has that 1.18 times crop. If you're using digital image stabilization, that's a 1.29 times. 4K 30p does not have a crop on it at all. Full HD, you only have a crop on it if you're either using digital image stabilization, which is minimal, at 1.1 times. Full HD at high speed has a 1.29 times crop. However, with all these variations going on, you can set it so that all of them have the same crop at 1.29 times. And that's beneficial to you because it keeps all your shots consistent. Unfortunately, there are no Xlr adapters coming for this camera, which means we're not going to be getting that 24-bit audio recording. 3.5mm jack, 16-bit recording though. This is a hybrid camera for stills and video, so for someone who just wants to pick it up, get some nice video with some nice audio, this is one to get. Let's show some test footage.
The X-T4 isn't just an upgrade over the X-T3, it's a completely new camera. It's generations ahead. The type of upgrades we've seen in this camera, to name a few: the new battery with massively increased life, new mechanical shutter doubling the expectancy from the X-T3, now 300,000 actuations, and giving us 15 frames per second. The movie to stills switch, which I adore. I love this so much, and anyone who buys this camera is going to love it too. The movie functionality, up to 240 frames per second slow-mo, 4K 60p, 10-bit internally, and then of course that IBIS unit. Those upgrades are generations ahead. That's what you'd see over 2 or 3 generations of building a camera series. So it's really exciting what Fuji's done with this camera. And of course you have that massive amount of native lenses as well to go with this camera. So it's a really exciting piece of kit, and I think getting your hands on it is a really good idea if you haven't tried something like this from Fuji before. Remember, you can go into our stores, talk to our expert staff about these type of cameras. You can also give us a call, send us an email, and pop onto the website. We've got loads of information on there. So if there's something you've missed from this review that you want to know a bit more about, of course, pop onto the website, pop onto our blog. We've got loads of new stuff coming through because we didn't have all the info when we started doing this review. If you want to know more from us, put a comment here and we'll try our best to get back to you with all the information that you could need. But for now, make sure to subscribe to the channel, turn on those notifications, because we will be doing more with the X-T4 when it becomes a production model camera. At the moment, we've just got it for a tiny little bit of a test to try it out, and I have really enjoyed it. Thanks for watching.